Throughout history, some dogs have become legendary for their remarkable deeds and loyalty. Today, we will explore the incredible stories of a dog who have left an indelible mark on our world. This hero is Balto, a Siberian husky who played a crucial role in saving the lives of the townspeople of Nome, Alaska, from a deadly outbreak. Gold mining brought prospectors to the small town of Nome, Alaska. At that time, there were no paved roads in Nome, making travel very difficult, especially during the winter season. A Norwegian man named Leonhard Seppala owned a dog kennel in Nome. Seppala is credited with being the first person to introduce a breed of Russian working dog from Siberia to the United States, later known as the Siberian Husky. These dogs became so popular in Alaska that he decided to breed them for a living. He was only interested in dogs that were light and fast. Seppala was one of the first people to compete in competitive dog sledding in the United States. One of the many puppies born in Seppala's kennel was named Balto. He was born with brown eyes and black skin with white socks on his front legs. Balto was apparently very big. Seppala immediately neutered him. Seppala leased the breeding dogs that didn't fit his needs to community members to use for pulling their dog sleds. In winter, dog sleds were the only option for travel outside the city to exchange gold for supplies.
Shots! Oh. Okay, hey.
As many men traveled to Nome to find work in the mining industry, Seppala was able to make a fortune by renting and selling his dogs. Seppala's favorite husky was called Togo. He was a perfect example of a husky that was extremely light and muscular. As the stories say, Togo was so fast that he could race a train and win. So Seppala spent all his time and energy training his favorite dog. At this time, a man named Gunnar Kaysen had moved from Norway to Nome, Alaska, to participate in gold mining. He paid to rent some of Seppala's dogs for procurement use. Carson also chose Balto, and there is no record of why Carson chose Balto as his main dog. But most people believe it was because he felt some kind of connection from the beginning. Most people would choose a dog for leadership that they could trust. Kaysen saw something special in Balto and decided to take him home. In the early 1613s, the diphtheria pandemic spread across the world, and the world suffered approximately over 300 years of this disease. In addition, in the 1920 United States experienced the highest prevalence of this pandemic. It was estimated that 100,000 to 200,000 people were infected with diphtheria in America alone, and 13,000 to 15,000 people died from the disease each year. Most of these victims were children.
Every year, 3,000 children die like this from diphtheria.
This child need not have died. He could have been immunized and so protected against diphtheria.
Diphtheria also affected the royal family in 1878. Princess Alice, Queen Victoria's second daughter, and her family became infected with diphtheria. Princess Alice and her 4-year-old daughter, Princess Marie, both died. Diphtheria causes severe respiratory problems. Symptoms include a sore throat, mild fever, and a sticky membrane on the tonsils, pharynx, and inside the nostrils. In some cases, it can also affect the skin. The disease damages the nerve sheaths in the central and peripheral nervous systems, leading to a loss of sensation and muscle control. Ultimately, it results in suffocation and death. One of the most famous outbreaks in America occurred in the Nome region of Alaska in 1925. At that time, the diphtheria vaccine had just been developed. The city of Nome was enduring one of its harshest winters, with temperatures plummeting to -45 degrees and wind speeds reaching 50 to 80 miles per hour. In December 1924, an unprecedented number of children visited the city's only doctor, Curtis Welch. Initially, Dr. Welch thought the children simply had sore throats, with their parents trying to keep them healthy during the holidays. However, by January 1925, 2 children had died. It was then that Dr. Welch realized the disease was actually a highly contagious illness called diphtheria, which had already infected most of the children in the city. Children were much more susceptible to diphtheria than adults, so parents watched helplessly as their sons and daughters slowly suffocated. Dr. Welch announced that all infected children should be quarantined to prevent the spread of the disease. Although there was a cure for diphtheria since the vaccine had just been developed, the city of Nome was not equipped to treat this epidemic. They needed a drug called thiazide antitoxin serum. Dr. Welch and his 4 nurses, being the only medical professionals in the city, they worked day and night to treat the children. The total population of Nome was only 10,000 people. Even after quarantining the infected, it was too late. More and more people were getting sick every day. Everyone feared that if the outbreak wasn't contained, all the children might die, and it could also spread to adults. It was in this desperate situation that Balto arrived, becoming a symbol of commitment and loyalty that remains alive in our hearts to this day. On January 22, 1925, Dr. Welch sent dozens of telegrams to doctors around Alaska and even to Washington, D.C., hoping to get enough antitoxin. They were eager to help, but the only issue was delivery. The winds were too strong for a small plane to navigate in that weather, and there was so much ice that a ship could not reach their port. The closest city that could deliver the medicine was Anchorage, but the train stopped at a city called Nenana, which was 674 miles away from Nome. After that, there was no longer a train route to the city of Nome. The only choice was to take the sled dogs over the snow, which usually took 15 to 20 days. There were many obstacles such as mountains, steep chasms, and frozen rivers, which would slow down the travel speed. The governor of the Alaska Territory, Scott Bone, approved and implemented a plan to transport medicine by sled. The plan was for 20 men and 150 dogs to wait at checkpoints where they would pass the medicine to the next team so that they could quickly transport the medicine to the city of Nome. The first man to pick up the drug at the Nenana train station was Wild Bill Shannon. He traveled for 24 straight hours in -60-degree weather to reach the first checkpoint. 3 of his 9 dogs collapsed and died due to frozen lungs. Leonhard Seppala volunteered to do the most dangerous part of the journey because he had the most experience. Led by his dog Togo, he traveled the most dangerous route at a very fast speed and almost derailed the entire mission. Since Dr. Welch had sent telegrams across the country a few days earlier, stories of the epidemic were being printed in newspapers in the lower 48 states. It was a gripping and sad story. People across the United States were hoping and praying. Gunnar Carson, who had rented Balto from Seppala, traveled the last route called the Iditarod several times with Balto. He was asked to be one of the 20 men who would help in transporting the medicine. Unlike Seppala and the other men, Carson had never participated in a sled race and was considered a beginner compared to the others. So Balto was the best friend Carson knew he could always rely on. But no one could have predicted what would happen. While Carson was about to travel, a terrible storm started. Each of the checkpoint stations received a message that the implementation of drug delivery was temporarily cancelled because a very dangerous storm had arrived. But Carson was already in the wilderness with all the medicine on the journey, and the message to stop had not reached him. Until the storm was over, there was nowhere for him to take shelter. Everything was white. Carson couldn't even see his hand in front of his face, let alone find his direction. He stopped moving for 2 hours, hoping with Balto and the rest of his sled dogs that the storm would soon pass. But he couldn't stop thinking about the children in the hospital. Every minute another child would die without the medicine, and if he waited much longer, it was unlikely that they would survive the night. He decided that even though he couldn't see anything, his only option was to move forward. Carson had to put all his faith in Balto. Dogs have a much better sense of direction than humans, and he had been down this road many times before. Balto led the way, using his senses to guide the rest of the team where they needed to go. At one point, they hit a wind tunnel that was strong enough to knock over the sled. The serum fell into a big snowbank. Carson could not find the drug for a long time. He got down on his hands and knees and dug through the snow to find the medicine. Balto and Carson finally arrived at a city called Port Safety, which was the next checkpoint on the relay. However, he arrived in the middle of the night, and since the next team had been told that the medicine transfer process had been cancelled due to heavy storms, the man and the dogs had fallen asleep. Only 12 miles before the end of the mission, Carson decided to rely on Balto to complete the last stage of the journey. They succeeded, and when they reached the city of Nome, it was 5:30 in the morning. He went straight to Dr. Welch, who immediately injected the medicine into the children. They all slowly recovered completely. After Balto arrived in Nome, journalists from all over the United States started calling Gunner Carson, asking for interviews to hear the story of his near-death experience in delivering the medicine. Carson was a humble person and always replied that this honor belonged to the whole team because everyone participated in this difficult mission. Americans across the country wanted to meet Balto, and children loved hearing Balto's heroic story. Balto was invited to the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles, where Carson was shocked by the presence and cheering of cinematographers at the hotel. Balto traveled all over America and was greeted like a national hero. A bronze statue of him was even created in Central Park, New York City. Seppala was still Balto's real owner, but Gunnar Carson received all the credit. Seppala was incredibly jealous because he had devoted most of his life to dog breeding and racing. He also took the most dangerous part of the route and the greatest risk during the journey. He insisted that he and Togo deserved the recognition, not these amateurs. Seppala decided to travel to New York with Togo and his other dogs to show that Togo, not Balto, was the dog worthy of acclaim. However, in New York, when children talked about Balto and asked Seppala about him, he grew frustrated. To get rid of Balto, Seppala decided to sell him. Finally, Seppala sold Balto at an auction, much to Carson's dismay. Balto was sold to a man named Hewson and exhibited in his dime museum in Los Angeles. Balto was chained to the wall all day, and people came to the museum, paying for a ticket to see him. He wasn't allowed to play or exercise, and Hewson barely fed him. As a result, Balto became very weak and thin. In 1927, a man named George Campbell from Cleveland, Ohio, visited the Dime Museum in Los Angeles and found Balto. Campbell had read all the stories in the newspapers and was horrified to see this heroic dog being mistreated. He asked Sam Hewson the price to buy Balto, which was $2,000, and later increased to $2,800. George Campbell couldn't afford this amount himself, so he started a campaign in Cleveland called Save Balto, the Hero Dog. People from all over the city contributed money. Even small children participated, collecting funds to buy Balto. They raised enough money to buy Balto and bring him to Cleveland. When Balto arrived, 150,000 women, girls, men and children lined up to welcome him. The campaign raised more money than needed, and the extra funds were used to build a small zoo in the city to house pets, with the support of the community and the government. Balto spent the next 6 years of his life there in comfort. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned with 4 Studio.